Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to go over Lightroom Classic. If you saw last week's video, you would have seen how I did Lightroom Mobile on both your desktop and your iPad and how you can sync between the two. And I was asked, what about Lightroom Classic? For those of us that aren't interested in editing on our iPads or that want to have more editing abilities and capabilities that Lightroom Classic can offer over Lightroom Mobile. So that's exactly what we'll do today. And if there are particular areas that you want to focus on, what I'll do down in the description below is I'll put timestamps down so you can skip through to the parts you need. So you don't have to sit through and wait to see exactly what's going on. And then that way you can get the answers you need quicker than thinking, how long in this 10 hours is pin going to take to get to the information that I need? So check out the timestamps down below to see if there's anything particular you want to look for. But let's jump on the computer into Lightroom Classic. I'll show you how it's laid out, and then I'll create a new catalog with you, show you how to import your photos and how you can do some pretty basic edits with them, and then get them ready to export as well. So here we are in Lightroom Classic. This is what your catalog will eventually look like. Right, so what I'll do is I'll actually show you how a catalog looks once you've got pictures in there and edited, and then I'll show you how to create a catalog and import your photos. The catalog you're looking at right now is actually my print catalog. These are the images that I have put up for sale at some point on my website. So I'll show you how everything's laid out here on the library module, and then we'll work through the develop, map, book, slideshow, print, and web module as well. So over here on the left, you've got navigator, catalog, folders, collections, and publish services. As you can see up here, it says fit. This is exactly how your image looks when it's filling up the screen or fitted to the size of the screen. And then you've got different zoom in and zoom out options. You can zoom into 100%, and you can see it shows you exactly where in your image you are actually zoomed into. And you can change it to other percentages. So if you really want to zoom out, you've got 6%. I like to keep it at fit unless I'm zooming in and doing some touching up, which I'll normally be doing in Photoshop anyway. Below that, you've got catalog. So this shows you exactly how many photos are currently sitting in your catalog at any given time. If there's any that are synced, here you've got synced. So these are synced that would be synced with Lightroom that you can sync to your iPad. Below is folders. These are the folders on your local computer or external hard disk that you're working off, where you've actually got pictures imported from that are sitting inside your Lightroom catalog. And then you've got collections. And with collections, what you can do is you can use it to group your photos in ways that are different to your actual folder. A good example is, as you can see, I've got quite a few pictures of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, so I can create a collection, call it Harbour Bridge. I can select a few of these pictures that have the Harbour Bridge in them, and then drag them onto the Harbour Bridge collection. So now when I click on this, it'll only show those images that I have added to it. But for now, we'll just stick with the actual print files themselves. At the bottom here, you've got your Filmstrip. This is just a way of seeing all the pictures that are currently in your catalog based on the folder that you have chosen up here. Scroll up so you can see what I mean. So all photos. And you can just hover your mouse until you see the arrow, drag it up to make the film strip larger or down to make the film strip smaller. I like to keep it quite small just because I don't really need to look at it too often. On the right, you've got your histogram, the quick develop. So if you've got any presets that you want to apply, you can quickly add these onto one picture or all of the pictures. So if I wanted to, I could select all these pictures, go preset, and let's just take a low contrast one that I've done, and now you can see that it's applied that preset to all those photos for me, but I'm going to undo that. And then as you scroll down, you can enter keywords because these will actually get added onto the file itself. A full keyword list. It's something I did when I was in Thailand a couple years back, but I haven't done it since. And then metadata. Updating the metadata on your images is very important because what you can do is you can put your name, or if you're running a business, you put your business name on there. And then that way, that metadata information actually gets baked into the image file itself. So whether you put it online, Facebook, Instagram, wherever it may be, that metadata is actually saved into the file. So that way, if someone was to download it and publish it and say, look at this amazing picture I've got, you can actually look at that file, download it yourself from wherever someone's posted it to, look at the metadata and confirm whether it's your photo or not, which unfortunately, that does happen from time to time. I'm not going to get into the whole debate as to why that's not a good thing to do, except to say that you shouldn't do it. But it gives you that extra layer of protection to say, yes, you know what, you're using my photo without my permission. Please take it down if you're not going to compensate me properly for it. But that's a whole other debate. Definitely put in the metadata. You'll thank me later. It's something I've been doing since day one as a just in case. I don't think anyone actually would take any of my photos and publish them as theirs, but you never know, and just spending an extra couple minutes doing this to set it up at the very beginning will save you a lot of stress down the road. So here in the metadata, I'm actually going to put in my business name. I'm going to copy that, put that down in the creator field as well. And then this way, it's always going to be there. And finally, here we are in the middle of the library module, where, as you can see right now, we've got a grid. So this is a grid of all the pictures that are currently in your catalog, depending on which particular folder you've selected over here on the left, or if you've selected an actual folder from your computer just a little bit further down. Like right here, you can see I've got prints that has 43, or PSD files that has 47. Let's just keep it at all photos for now, just to make life simple. At the bottom here, you've got grid. This allows you to see all of your photos as thumbnails instead of each individual one. You can change the size of the thumbnails over here on the right by moving the slider over to the right or left. As you can see, as I move it to the right, the thumbnails get larger. If I move it to the left, the thumbnails get smaller. If you did want to just go through and see them one by one, like if you're culling your photos after a day out, you can press the button next to it, and then you've got each individual image in front of you. And you can select different images by clicking on them with your mouse or going left or right on your keyboard. Over here, you've got your compare view. So this lets you compare two separate photos side by side. So as an example, if I wanted to compare these two photos from Bear Island at La Perouse, I can select both of them. And I can see on the left, I've got the one that had the pink skies, and on the right, I've got the one that had the orange skies, and then I can choose which image I prefer out of the two. This comes in handy when you're not sure which one to choose, and that way you can have them both side by side instead of swapping between them, because that way you get a much better idea as to which one's the better photo that you want to keep, publish, sell, print, whatever the case may be. Next to that, you've got survey view. This allows you to add in multiple pictures. So I can add in 3 pictures, 4 pictures, 5, 6 pictures, and I can compare all of them as necessary. And if I don't want to look at one, like this one is very different, nope, out. Or this one doesn't belong here either, that one can go. And then now you can take a look, and these 4 photos, you know, we'll cut it down to 3 photos and then down to 2 photos. And then from there, you can toss it up and see which one it is you want to have. Next to that, you've got the people option, but I don't have any faces in any of my pictures because I do landscape photography, so there's nothing actually there to show you. Further down here on the right from the Filmstrip, you can see here we've got your filter options. Right now, I don't have any filters on here. A few of the images do have star ratings, as you can see here. This one's got 5-star. This one's also got 5-star, as does this one. But the first filter you've got is flagged photos. If you remember a previous video I did on how I organize my photos and how I edit and then show you the culling process, this is where seeing the photos I've rejected come in handy, because instead of having to go through and select all of them later, I can select the photos that are just flagged. And then after that, you've got your star rating. So if I just want to look at pictures that are 3 stars and above, you can see it brings up those 4 images again. Or let's say I wanted to see pictures that have been flagged as red, I can click here on the color option as well. So if I click on the red, it'll only show me the red photos. If you've got multiple colors, you can add them in as well. I don't, but as you can see here, if I click the red and the blue, it says labeled red or blue. So we'll turn those off. That's how the Lightroom module works. What I'll do now is I'll actually create a brand new catalog so you can see how that's done. Now that you've seen how the Lightroom module is laid out, we'll import some photos so you can see what that process is, and then we'll go into the develop module. First thing we'll do is go up here to file, hit new catalog. And when you're creating a new catalog, I found, after having done it multiple times and tried different variations as to how I'd like to organize my photos, I found that by creating catalogs inside its own dedicated folder means that it makes it easy, because that way if you ever need to move that catalog from one computer to another, or just from one hard disk to an external hard disk, whatever the case may be, it makes sure that you've got all the files there and you're not going to be missing anything and risk having to start all over again. If you may remember, a year ago, I didn't even have this laptop. I actually had the Studio, but I was able to copy my print catalog over because I just copied the folder, put it onto an external hard disk, and then loaded it on this laptop, and it just saved a lot of drama because I didn't have to start it again. I didn't have to re-edit anything. It was all there ready to go. The only thing I had to do was tell this laptop where the print files were sitting instead of re-editing all of them. So what we'll do is, as you can see, I've got a catalog folder. So for today, we'll create a new folder and I'll call it Lightroom Tutorial, if I remember how to type, catalog. And then what I'll do is, just so I know exactly what's what, I'm going to give the catalog exactly the same name as the folder. That way I don't have to worry about anything being mixed up later on. And I'm just going to hit create. Whilst Lightroom is reloading, I just want to say, if you are enjoying this video so far, please do give it a thumbs up. That will be greatly appreciated. It does help out a lot more than you know. And if you want to stay up to date with future videos as well, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tick that little bell, so that way you get a notification every time a new video is released. But Now that Lightroom's ready, let's jump back on the computer. So as you can see, there are no images in the film strip, there's no images in the grid, there's no images anywhere. So what I'll do is I'll go down here to import. So now we get to choose the pictures that we'd like to import into Lightroom. I'll just go into this folder, go to raw files, and I'll just load up the pictures that I've taken from Turmeda Beach. And as you can see, these are all the photos I've taken. 400 odd photos in one day. Not too much, is it? Anyway, file handling. This is where you can choose whether you like to build smart previews. Smart previews allows for a quicker edit because it's like a low res file that you're actually loading. Don't import suspected duplicates. I always keep this because sometimes when I am moving files around, I've accidentally duplicated it for whatever crazy reason, and to make sure I'm not importing the same file twice. And add to collection. This is if you do want to add them to a collection. I almost never use collection, so I just leave it blank. And then apply during import. You can apply particular presets if you want to all of your pictures when you first load them up. So I'll actually put lens correction on, and then metadata. Remember how I said metadata is very important? If you apply the metadata to your images as you're importing, you know that it's already there, so you don't have to worry about adding it on later on when you're finished editing and ready to export them. So just choose metadata, and I'm just going to hit import. As you can see, Lightroom has imported all the photos, but now it's also creating initial previews. That way, if I wanted to quickly go through and see each individual photo on the full size option, not the grid option, I can start moving through to see exactly which photos I've got. So these are all the photos in. Now let's head into develop. Develop module is where I think you'll spend the bulk of your time, because this is where you can edit your photos, merge your photos if you want to do a panorama, HDR, or both, or if you want to select multiples and export them into Lightroom to do focus stacking or exposure blending like I've done before. If you want to see how I did that, I'll put a link up to the video where I did do exposure blending when I was out at Barangaroo. And you can see how easily you can blend some photos together in Photoshop once you finish editing them in Lightroom first. So here we are in the develop module. And as you can see here, you do really only have the option for the film strip. There is no grid option down here at the bottom, because this is where you'll be able to edit each photo one by one. All right, on the left here, you've got the navigator. Below that, you've got presets. Presets are always a touchy topic. Some people are fans of them, some are not. I'm neutral when it comes to presets. I'll do a completely separate video as to where I think they do have their place in photo editing, but we'll leave that for a separate video and just focus on Lightroom for today. Lightroom does come preloaded with a few presets. So here you've got color, and this is where it gives you a few options as to quick edits that you want to apply to your image. Vivid is something I used to use a lot with my old Nikon camera. Below that, you've got creative. This is where you do get a little bit more playing around with the actual images that you like. And then below that, you've got black and white, where if you did want to make black and white images out of them, you've got a few different options that you can choose from. I've got a few of my own presets that I've created here. Lens correction is the chromatic aberration and lens distortion adjustments. Low contrast is just a few basic adjustments with some increase in contrast. High contrast is everything else is the same. I've just increased the contrast. Snapshots I've never actually used. History shows you the edits that you've done to your photos to a certain extent. I think mine is limited to the last 20 edits that I've done to a photo. As you can see in this case, I've imported the image and applied the lens correction. I've applied the low contrast, high contrast, low contrast preset. But if I wanted to go back, I can remove them. I can just hit this one and it brings me back to that edit. And then collections, which if you have this added to a collection, you can add it to the collections as needed. Over here on the right, this is very similar to Lightroom Mobile, where these are where you're able to edit all of your photos. At the top here, you've got your histogram, so this shows you your blacks, shadows, exposure, highlights, and whites. I'm not going to get into how to understand the histogram or what an ideal image will look like. This particular image is going to show a lot of whites, and that's because of the crashing waves are white. You've got your crop tool, your spot remover tool. I mentioned how I'm not a fan of the spot remover tool in Lightroom in multiple videos, so I won't go over that one again, except to say do that in Photoshop. Red eye correction. I hardly have people looking into the camera when I take photos. Graduated filters, this one I use quite a bit. Radial filters and a brush tool. So these are where you've got the options to do more localized edits in your image, more so than global edits. Basic is where you can adjust everything that there is about your image on a global scale. So you can change the white balance if you want to make it a bit warmer, if you want to make it cooler depending on what it is, if you want to make it more magenta or green tinged depending on your creative flair. And if you want to reset any of them, double click on the name and it resets it to exactly what it was before. Exposure to make it brighter or darker. Ooh, too dark. contrast, highlight, shadows, etc. Below that, you've got Hsl Color Tool. Hsl is hue, saturation, and luminance. I like to keep it at all because I like to just work my way down instead of having to worry about clicking through them. Tone curve. This does allow you quite a lot of editing power when you use this properly in terms of being able to make a few changes. It doesn't make any changes anywhere else in the image, just in here, but it gives you a lot of editing creativity abilities. Color grading, this is a relatively new tool to Lightroom. This only came out within the past couple months, or within the past year at least. Definitely within the past year. And it's where you can start playing around with the colors depending on what it is you're working with. Whether it's the mid-tone, shadows, or highlights. Detail for sharpening your pictures. So sharpening lets you sharpen your image. Radius is how effective you want the sharpening to be. Detail, masking, lets you see exactly where it's being edited. Luminous and noise reduction. Whether you should use this is always a debate because if you've taken a picture that's got high ISO, it is going to be very grainy. Some say yes, you should use it to reduce the grain. Some photographers say embrace the grain because that's just the way it is, and there's nothing wrong with a little bit of noise in a photo. It's just if you have a really noisy photo, that's when it can detract from the image. So whether you want to use it, it's completely up to you depending on how you want to edit your photo. Lens correction, I had applied this already at the beginning when my pictures were imported, so I don't need to worry about adding it on now. But as you can see, it removes chromatic aberration and enable profile correction. Adobe has worked with a lot of the camera manufacturers to apply the adjustments needed depending on the camera model and lens. So in this case, I've used my Canon and my 24-105, and it's applied that particular profile to it. And then if you want to add distortion, you can, but I never have. And there's some distortion for you, but it doesn't look natural to me, so I keep it flat. And then vignetting, if you do want to add a vignette to your image. Transform allows you to move your image around. As you can see, it's just rotating it on horizontal plane. This is rotating it vertically, depending on whatever changes it is you want to do. Rotating it, changing the aspect of it. Effects, this is if you have added, this is where you can edit a vignette, and depending on what it is you would like to do. And then lastly, calibration, where this allows you to tweak different colors within your image depending on what it is you would like to do. Let's say you've edited your image and you're not happy with the edits you've done. You've got two options. You can undo all of the edits, or down here you see this button reset. If you click that, it resets everything, except in my case, that lens correction and chromatic aberration, and that's because that's how the image was imported. But if you imported it without anything applied like that, it resets it to its absolute raw file. No edits applied, no changes applied, just raw straight out of the camera. Within the develop module, you do have a few options beyond just doing the edits that you've got here on the right side. You do also have the options to do HDR photos, where you blend multiple exposures together to make one very high dynamic ranged photo. Or you can do panoramas, where you've taken multiple photos, stitched to get multiple photos side by side, and then you get Lightroom to stitch them together for you. So if you did want to do that, I'll just go right to the end because I know I've got a few here. Actually, let's straighten these up first. Here I've got images that I took to do a panorama. We'll start on the first one. This was actually a HDR done on purpose. So if you can see up here below the histogram, it's actually got your settings that you would take in the picture at. So ISO 50 at 50 millimeters, f13 10 seconds. The next one is at 8 seconds, and then the one after that will be at 13 seconds. And that's because I told the camera to do a 1/3 of a stop difference between each photo. Now, let's say I wanted to combine all three of them into a HDR photo. I can do that by selecting all three, hold down Shift, select all three, right click, and here you've got photo merge. And I can choose HDR or the keyboard shortcut Control H. And when you do that, a new window opens and it's going to create a preview for you. Then once it's done, you do have auto align, which I highly recommend. Auto settings, not really, because you've already edited your photo. Or if you've done this before, you've edited your photo, you can edit it yourself, or you can let Lightroom do it for you. It's up to you. Then deghost amount. Deghost comes in handy where, not in this one, but in other pictures where you've done exposure bracketing to create high dynamic range images at the water and the water's moved. It tries to blend it all together and make sure there's no transparent spots. But there are a few errors sometimes when you do that, so it is worth it to bear that in mind. I always just leave it as none, but you can always just go through and see if it does make any difference. And when you're done, you can just hit merge, and then Lightroom will merge all of these for you, as you can see up here on the top left. And then it actually creates a new file for you as well. which once you've selected it, you can see here it's got H501 HDR.dng. So that's a raw file, that DNG, and H501 is just referring the first image that I selected when I selected all three. I don't want to keep this image in for now. So what I'll do is I'm going to right click and go remove. And then you've got two options. You can remove it from Lightroom, which just takes it out of your catalog, but it keeps it on the computer, or you hit delete from disk, which sends it to the recycle bin. But let's say I wanted to put together a panorama. So I know that these were shots of packs of three. So I'll choose the pictures I need to do a panorama quickly. So I've selected all the pictures I need for my panorama. I'm going to go right click, photo merge, panorama, or the keyboard shortcut Control M, and it's going to merge them together for me. Whilst Lightroom's putting together the panorama for me, well, one thing I'll quickly say is that when I am allowed out to go and take photos again, beyond just when I'm taking a walk, I should say, I'll actually show you how I set up and take a panorama when I'm out on doing landscape or cityscape photography. That way you can see how it's done, how it's put together, and then how it's also edited together in Lightroom, and if I want to finish it off in Photoshop as well. When I say if I want to, I mean if I actually want to take the picture into Photoshop to finish off editing it, or just leave it with what I've done in Lightroom. So here's the edited image in Lightroom, and you've got three different options when it comes to how it's put together. You've got spherical, cylindrical, and perspective. Perspective doesn't always work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. If it does, great. If not, don't worry about it. I've often found that cylindrical is the best for what I try to do, but it depends on your personal preference. And the reason I choose cylindrical is if you look at cylindrical here versus spherical, cylindrical is not as wide. It's a little bit taller in comparison compared to spherical. So it's just personal preference. And then here you've got boundary warp, where sometimes when you take a panorama, your edges will fall off, and Lightroom lets you adjust that a little bit. And you can do that in both spherical and cylindrical as well. Whether you do boundary warp is a personal preference. It literally comes down to what it is you want to do with that particular image. Every time I do a panorama, I'll always do a boundary warp at 0 and then again at 100, just to see what the differences are. And I'll tweak it to see what I like best. And sometimes I'll go spherical, boundary warp 100, sometimes cylindrical 0. It all depends on how everything is stitched together. Let's leave it at cylindrical 100 and we'll just hit merge. And here is our panorama image. Sometimes there are issues when Lightroom does a panorama where, as you can see here, if I zoom in to 100%, it didn't stitch this together. That's my fault. That's because I didn't set up my tripod properly when I was taking the pictures. That's why I said I was going to show you how I do set it up, because that way issues like this don't happen to you when you're out there, because I knew this was coming before I decided to do this tutorial, and I wanted to use this as a perfect example to show what can happen if you don't set your tripod up properly when you're doing a panorama. So this is very hard to fix. I've actually spent about an hour trying to fix it and I can't. And Lightroom has created this as a new file as well. As you can see down here, it's got 5099 pano. 5099 refers to the very first picture that I selected when I wanted to do my panorama. So that's the bulk of the develop module for you. If you did want to take it out of Lightroom and finish off editing it in Photoshop like I do, you can right click on the image and go edit in Photoshop. If you've got a different project like Capture One that you want to finish editing it in, it'll show up here as well. You also do have the option to open it as a smart object in Photoshop, but I never do that. I just open it as Photoshop and go from there. When you do right click on an image, you've got all these different options that you've got as well. You've got set flag if you want to flag it for future reference or to reject it. Rating if you want to give it a star rating, but I find just using the keyboard numbers 1 to 5 quicker. And with color labels, red is 6, yellow is 7 if you wanted to use your keyboards as well. Stacking if you wanted to group all of it together. So let's say this is where stacking comes in handy. I've got all these pictures here for a panorama. So let's select all of them except the actual panorama itself. Right click and I can go stacking and group into a stack. And then here you can see that this stack has 24 images. So if I wanted to, I can double click on it. And now here's all the 24 images in that particular stack. And then if I double click on it again, you can see that stack has now collapsed. Just keep on this one for reference. Create virtual copy. What this does is this actually just creates a copy of your actual image itself. And you can see here you've got 1 of 2 and 2 of 2. If you ever need to know which one you're working with, whether it's the original or the copy, it will actually say copy 1. You can make another virtual copy if you like, and then here you've got copy 2. And when you want to remove them, you can just remove it from Lightroom, because since it's a virtual copy, it's not an actual file that's saved on your disk. It's just some data sitting in a Lightroom catalog. And when you right click, you do have other options as well. So transform lets you rotate it if you wanted to rotate it left or rotate it right, or you can even flip it if you wanted to turn it the other way around. And then when you are ready to export your image. When you are ready to export your photo, once you've finished editing it, you can right click on it, either on the image itself or down here in the film strip, select export, and then go to export again. And this is where you can actually choose all the different settings you want to apply to the exported image. You can choose exactly where you want it to go. If you wanted to give it a custom name. This one's not a video, so the video doesn't apply. File settings, so image format, whether you want JPEG, Photoshop, TIFF files, the quality of it, color space, if you want it to be resized to a particular size. So like this is 2000 and this one was for Google Photos specifically. If you don't want it to be resized, untick that and it'll just export it at the actual size this image is. And if you want it to be sharpened as well for screen or printing purposes, you can also add a watermark to it if you like. So if you do want to add a watermark, you can just edit watermarks and add this one in. And here's a watermark. So I can put a watermark on it if I wanted to, and then you can choose exactly where it goes. I'm not going to add a watermark. And then once it's done, you can choose do nothing, open it in a Photoshop, open it somewhere else, or show the folder. I just choose do nothing because I'm often still doing other work anyway. And then hit export. If you've already edited a few pictures and exported them and you wanted to export another photo with exactly the same settings, you can right click on it, go export and export with previous, and then this will send this to the same folder you last used using the same export settings you last used as well. So that way you don't have to worry about applying them again. It's just all done for you. So that's how you can edit a photo. You do have the same options up here like I mentioned earlier, and these are exactly the same like you've got with Lightroom. So you've got a graduated filter, which when you select that, you can apply the graduated filter down. And as before, hold down Shift and it keeps it perfectly flat. And then you've got all the different editing options for this particular photo. And saying that you don't have all of the editing tools with the filters or the brush options, you do have the basic edits and the sharpening options, which I have found in 99% of the times has been more than enough. If I wanted to do specific color editing, I'll take it into Photoshop and do the edits there, but that's only ever happened like twice. So it's not something that ever really comes up. With the brush option, you do have the option where, as you can see here, the brush is quite small. If you press the right bracket on your keyboard, it makes it larger. Or if you scroll down here, you've got size. You can make it larger or smaller. And the feather determines how much of a gradient there is. So here, if I make the feather really small, so let's press O so you can see it. You can see that it's quite a hard edge. But if I make the feather really large, it's quite a soft edge in comparison. Let's make this smaller so you can see a better option of it. So let's do a feather, large feather, medium size. So there you can see it's quite soft, but if I make the feather really low, it's a hard line. So it comes down to what it is you would like to do. Flow is a little bit like opacity. So 100 is completely visible. If you drop it down to 50, it's halfway visible, but as you paint over it, it'll get darker. And if you make it 0, you don't see anything. And when you're finished with it, just hit done and it brings you back to the main editing workspace. Are you guys still with me so far? So I should have mentioned earlier, this is a bit of a longer one because there's so much to cover in this program. I am trying to keep it as simple as possible because I know that otherwise there's going to be so many things that you're going to learn. It's going to be information overload on the develop module. There's not much else more to show you when it comes to editing your photos, and that's probably where you are. I think you are going to spend 90% of your time. You do have a few other modules available in Lightroom that you can go through as well. Next one is map, where if you've got geotagging turned on either your phone or your camera, you can actually tag where you've taken each particular photo for future reference if you ever wanted to go back. I use Google Maps for that, not Lightroom, so it's not something I've ever actually used. Book, if you wanted to create a photo album. If you remember, I mentioned quite last year actually as to why you should print your photos, and one of them could be that you actually wanted to make a photo album of the last trip you went on, pre-COVID that is. I don't think any of us have gone on any trips since COVID. I know I certainly haven't. You can create a book in here and get it ready to be published. I've used other book companies where I found there's a lot more control than the book module, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, just to say that it is something you can do. Slideshow, death by PowerPoint. No, I'm just kidding. Slideshow is if you did want to make a slideshow out of your images. I haven't done a slideshow in I don't know how long. I don't even do them at work anymore. Print, I'll get to print in a sec. I just want to go over web quickly. Web, so this is where you can actually publish this to a website if you have built the website using this before, or if your website connects to Lightroom. I use Squarespace for my website, and I want to keep the two separate. That way I have complete autonomy between the two. They're not mixed or matched in any way, and I can decide what goes where. And also, if you've seen my website, you'll notice that none of the pictures that you've seen here today will actually be on the website. And that's because I like to do a little bit of adding in borders and placements to them so you can see exactly how they will look in your living room or office. But so now we get on to print. Print is not something I've had to use too often, and that's purely because I send my images to a printer to do the job for me because I don't have a printer. But they've always done an amazing job in getting my finalized images ready to print. The only thing I've got to do for them is make sure that it's the right size. But here in print, you've got everything that you need to be able to get your image ready for print. You can choose whether you want to do just one image or multiple images, or do it something completely separate. You can choose whether you want to zoom in just part of your image to fill because you're going to print it over multiple pages. You can rotate it to fit on the page so you don't waste too much paper, or if you wanted to repeat it. Stroke border, that's if you did want to add a border to it. And then margins, if this comes in handy if you know that you need to leave space around the printer because of bleed. A lot of printers will tell you to leave like a 1 centimeter border around it. It depends on the printer. How much you want to show, you can show all of these or nothing. So rulers, I find rulers always handy. Page bleed. Page bleed is like runoff. That's when you print, oftentimes there could be like a couple millimeters up to a centimeter of runoff that you need to be aware of. And so if you've got, let's say, an A2 print that you want to do, you've got to leave a 1 centimeter border all around it first before you hit print. Otherwise, the very edges of your print will not come out clean. To get it ready, here, print job, because I don't actually have a printer, I can't show you the finer details on how to get an image ready for print. But if you are interested in a couple other photographers I follow and they've shown how to get images ready for print, please let me know down below and I'll give you links to their videos where you can watch them as well. If you have lasted this long, thank you for surviving through this video with me. I do appreciate it. If you do have any questions about Lightroom, how to use it, or which one you prefer, whether it's Lightroom or Lightroom, like I said, Lightroom Mobile, let me know in the comments below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But I'll leave it there for today. If you have liked this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. That will be greatly appreciated and does help that YouTube algorithm out a lot. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any future videos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well and make sure that little bell sticks so you get a notification every time a new video comes out. But I'll leave it there for today. Thanks again for sticking around this long, and I'll see you on the next video. Have a good night.